Through history, whether it's in the Bible, whether it be in the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament, the sexual acts we see are about dominance and power.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture.
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
For inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, and then we're going to talk a little bit about history as we approach our 250th anniversary as a country. And then later on the pod, we sit down with Kathy Baldock. She's got a new book out titled Forging a Sacred Weapon, the 1946 Bible Misinterpretation Behind Anti-Gay Theology. It is a great pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
I am doing well.
Good.
Before we get into any substantive content,
Okay.
I'm going to call you out.
Oh, crap. What did I do now?
I just have to share this story because I found it so funny. So last weekend, we were in Los Angeles,
Yes.
going to several events in a hotel.
Mhm.
We were staying on the 8th floor.
Indeed, we were.
Okay, this is important to the story because that's a long elevator ride to the first
it
floor,
is.
right?
Yep.
So we were getting ready to leave. We get in the elevator. It's, in Los Angeles or, in that area, it's cool in the mornings. And so you were kind of layered up, had 2 shirts on.
Yeah, absolutely.
We get in the elevator and I realized you got some static cling going on
Right.
on your shirts. And
Uh-huh.
I was kind of like, I was trying to kind of fix it for you.
Yeah.
You decided, I know you're looking at me really puzzled right now because you don't remember the story I'm
I
telling.
remember you pulling on my shirt, but I don't remember it static clean. Go ahead.
Yeah. You decided that the way to fix this was to tuck in your undershirt, right?
Oh, I do remember this.
Okay, now you remember.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting until we got to the bottom floor and going to the bathroom.
Okay, I've got a defense on this, but go ahead.
Okay. You decided to just undo your belt and undo your pants and start tucking in the undershirt.
Of course.
On the long ride from the 8th floor to the first floor. Should have been fine, right?
Should have been fine. And here's my defense, because I had made that ride several times that day. Nobody had gotten on.
Okay. On this occasion, we get to the 7th floor and ding,
Bing, somebody gets on.
somebody's getting on the elevator. So you have to quickly turn around and face the corner and tuck your shirt in and zip your pants back up, which was so obvious, which made it look like we had been in the elevator doing something really inappropriate.
Well,
It was just so
whatever people think, that's what they think.
Oh
What am
my gosh.
I to do?
Not only that, but the funniest part is that for some reason, staying in the hotel that weekend, there was some sort of evangelical conference.
A lot of Jesus
group,
going on.
Lots of Jesus
going
shirts
on,
and
yeah.
all of this. So anyways, it was just funny that I assumed this person was with that group and then just walked into this
That's right.
couple on the elevator
Yeah.
zipping up their pants.
Well, what you didn't see is the guy high-fived me behind your back. But
Probably so. It was so funny though. So yeah.
Well, thanks for calling me out. I really appreciate that.
Well, yeah. But anyways, so our listeners may recall that a couple of weeks ago, we kind of decided to start a little mini series, if you will, leading
Yes.
into our nation's 250th birthday.
God bless America.
Right. And in celebration of kind of the end of school and
Yeah.
graduations and all of that kind of theme going on, we decided we're having a little parent-teacher conference
We did.
about our nation.
Yep.
We're going to go over some things that have happened throughout history, and we're just going to kind of gauge, what we think of these developments, right?
Absolutely. It's a
just
good
kinda-
idea.
Right. Loosely taking a This Week in History approach since we are Good Faith Weekly, right?
Right.
Okay, so this week I've brought a few standout moments in history that we can maybe just,
I cannot wait.
yeah, they're all over the place. So on this week in 1692, you may recall, the first Salem witch hanging took place,
Oh my gosh.
right?
Wow.
The woman's name was Bridget Bishop, and she was accused of witchcraft by more individuals than any other defendant.
Wow.
So her crimes, you might ask?
Yes.
She was said to have dubious moral character.
Oh my goodness.
She frequented taverns.
Well, of course.
She dressed flamboyantly.
Sounds like a witch to me.
And worst of all, she was married 3 times.
Thrice?
Thrice
Oh,
married.
my goodness.
So anyway, so yes, she was the first person hanged who was accused of being a witch.
Wow.
Throughout those trials, 13 more women and 5 men from all stations of life followed her to the gallows.
Wow. That's amazing. Stacy Schiff has a great biography about the Salem witch trials. It is
Ooh.
really good. It's terrific. I recommend it to anybody. I cannot remember the name of it.
But what's the author?
Stacy Schiff.
Stacy Schiff. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up. That would be a great listen this time of year. Okay, so moving forward, I would say that's a pretty dark stain on our history.
Definitely a dark stain. And it's one of the first moments in colonial history here in North America where religion is once again being used by a people who were oppressed, fleeing oppression,
Right.
religion being used to oppress others. And then it goes back to the saying of Roger Williams, I've left one shore of oppression to arrive at another here in this.
It's almost as if we can learn from history.
Almost.
Okay, so moving forward, in 1752, on this week in 1752, scholars debate the exact date, but we don't mind inaccuracy here at Good Faith Weekly, so we'll go with today.
Okay.
But they largely agree that in June, it was in the month of June, 1752, Benjamin Franklin flew his kite during a thunderstorm to collect ambient electrical charge.
Now, if our boys would have walked outside during a storm here in Oklahoma and threw a kite up in the air, what would you have said to them?
I don't think I can say that on the I was going to say on the radio.
On the radio. But one of the country's founding fathers
right?
was conducting scientific experiments.
Yeah, so he ended up coining several terms we use today, including battery, conductor, and electrician. He also invented the lightning rod that is used to protect buildings and ships.
Wow.
Overall, I would say that was a positive.
Yeah, it was a positive.
Gold star.
Yeah. Again,
right?
Want to go to a biography. Walter Isaacson wrote this wonderful biography about Franklin. He was one complex dude. I mean, just full of, can I say piss and vinegar? But he was. I mean, just really, just an amazing guy.
Okay, so at this juncture, I feel like you're coming at me with like all kinds of valid research. And
I'm just saying I read a lot.
On the Google. Okay, so in 1807, and this is not a super like important fact, but I found it in several different sources that I checked as a notable thing in history, and I have a personal connection. So if you'll allow me a moment. On this week in 1807, President Thomas Jefferson received a subpoena to testify in the treason trial of his former Vice President Aaron Burr.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
So in the subpoena, Burr had asked Jefferson to produce documents that might exonerate him, and Jefferson refused to appear in Burr's defense. There's debate on his motivation, whether he wanted Burr to be convicted or not.
And Aaron Burr is going to trial because?
Of treason.
Of treason, okay.
Accusations of treason, not for shooting not for shooting Hamilton, because duels were largely, I guess.
They did in New Jersey.
Everything is legal in New Jersey.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we've all heard the song. But my connection to this is that it was one of my ancestors, Colonel Joseph Crockett, who was then a United States Marshal, that arrested Burr in 1806.
Whoa.
Right?
Family connection.
Family connection. So I thought that was pretty cool. So that's the only reason I mentioned that. I don't know if it's a gold star or a stain on our history. I don't know.
And so for those of you who are questioning this, now I find it interesting. You and I, one of our favorite galleries in the nation's capital is the Portrait Gallery. And so we found a portrait of Davy Crockett, who is part of this Crockett lineage.
He's part of my family.
You all looked very similar. It was spooky.
It was interesting to see features of somebody you've never seen in real life, but you see this portrait and you're like, oh my goodness, I see similarities.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that would be the case in any portrait you see. I don't know.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I could see the resemblance.
Yes. Okay. So what's the famous saying? You can all go to hell, but I'm going to Texas.
You can go to Texas. I'll go to hell.
Okay. Moving on. On this week in 1835, Bill Wilson and Dr. Robert Smith, 2 recovering alcoholics, founded Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun little fact. In 1935. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, quite a while ago, about 90 years ago.
Positive.
So I found another little, on this week in history that didn't happen in the U.S., but I feel like, again, we could draw some parallels here.
Okay.
So on June 12th, 1942, Anne Frank, a young Jewish girl living in Amsterdam, receives a diary for her 13th birthday.
Oh, wow.
I have chills just saying that.
Yeah. I mean, just you never know what a gift will turn into
I
this
know.
world phenomena.
So on the date of, this
Wow, that's
podcast dropping,
amazing.
June 12th, 1942, Anne Frank received a diary for her 13th birthday.
Wow. So a great gift is a diary.
And I just wonder what child out there has a diary today that they're writing in. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get emotional.
Yeah.
But anyways, so when I read that, I just thought I have to bring that up because I
Yeah.
think it is so poignant and important to think about and maybe do things better this time.
100%.
Okay, moving on. Let me collect myself. In 1966, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a decision in Miranda v. Arizona, which established.
Miranda v. Arizona. Oh, I should know this.
You
shouldn't I?
should.
What is it?
Miranda rights.
Oh, the Miranda Dutch.
Duh. It is, of course, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to you.
Wow. I mean, you've said that like you've heard it before.
Let me tell you, you're going to hear it after this if you don't watch it. Yeah, so I think that's a really important,
Absolutely.
something we
It's
may
an important-
overlook, but it's a very important development in our nation, and I would
100%.
say it's a good one.
A positive,
I would
absolutely.
say gold star for that one at the parent-teacher conference. Okay, so moving on, in 1967, President Lyndon B. Johnson appointed Judge Thurgood Marshall to the Supreme Court.
Excellent.
Not surprisingly, his confirmation came after a very heated debate in the Senate, but once sworn in, he became the first African American to sit on the Supreme Court.
Big time positive.
So, big time positive. Wish that there were more, and that wasn't such an issue anymore today.
Absolutely.
But yeah, here we are. So, moving on, this week in 1979, Texas became the first state to pass a bill declaring Juneteenth a state holiday. The annual June 19th celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation, not the announcement itself, but the arrival of the news of the proclamation in Texas, is now officially observed in almost all 50 states. And of course, we know now the news of slavery's demise did not arrive until 2 months after Robert E. Lee's surrender at the end of the Civil War.
Absolutely positive. Hate that. I mean, it's Texas trying to right wrongs. Obviously, it was a slaveholding state at that time. And when the announcement came, I mean, kudos to Texas for acknowledging it.
Right. And just so that we know that Texas has not always continued on that trajectory. In 2003, the Supreme Court had to get involved in a case, Lawrence v. Texas, and declare that sodomy laws in the U.S. are unconstitutional. So, I mean, we get some right, we get some wrong.
Right.
I don't know. So there's that. And then the most recent bit of history I have, which is, again, somber, but also reminds us of why we're here today and why we're interviewing Kathy Baldock. This week in 2016, a terrorist gunman attacked Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida.
Oh my gosh. I've walked those hallowed grounds in Orlando, and it was just heartbreaking to know that such death and destruction took place in a nightclub where young men and women were celebrating their identities and just having fun, and bullets just rang through that nightclub, killing so many innocent people. It was terrible. And I'm glad I went just because to hold space there, because it is a sacred space.
It is, and we know this is Pride Month, and so all around is joy and rainbows, and that is an act of resistance, which is very important. But I hate that it's a reminder that we need that specified time. I am all about parties, you guys. Like, let's have more of that,
Yeah.
please. However, it's just a reminder that we didn't get here in a vacuum.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, it is Pride Month, and we've been attending Pride events for the last several weeks now. There are Pride events going all over the world right now. And it is something to be celebrated and something to be joyous about and happy about. But we must remember that the very reason for Pride is that it was born out of resistance. And of course, that happened in New York City at Stonewall, where a bunch of drag queens finally had had enough of the local police terrorizing them, and they began to fight back and to show pride in who they were. And so we must never forget that while we are celebrating and we are joyful during this month, those elements are born out of resistance. resistance to authoritarianism, resistance to exclusion, resistance to intoleration, because that is what we should be about, not only as a country, but as a people of faith, of bringing people, welcoming people, affirming people for who they are, who God created them to be, and loving them no matter what.
And just as we've been doing the last couple of weeks, and we'll do it for a couple of more weeks leading into the 250th celebration of our nation, it is important to look back at history
Yep.
and look back at both the good and the bad and find out how we got here.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk to Kathy Baldock, who's written a book, and she has gone extensively throughout history to examine how we got here, why this discrimination, why hate got here, how we developed our sexual ethic, how we developed our cultural norms. And it is very important to look at this history. It's very important to examine our own biases and reflect and hopefully bring about societal change.
Yeah. There's a lot of great books out there on LGBTQ history and the biblical misinterpretation of the Bible and application of the Bible when it comes to rejecting LGBTQ people. This book, in my opinion, is one of the best researched books out there. It lays out this totality of history, beginning, diving into cultures and how they saw gender roles, how they saw sexuality. And guess what, Missy?
What?
It changed throughout the years.
That's shocking, I tell you.
Yeah, not everybody was, a conservative evangelical or, an American or European looking at these things. Each culture was different. And Kathy does a brilliant job laying all that evidence out, talking about, of course, what happened in 1946 with NRSV and the mistranslation, where the word homosexuality is inserted into the Bible, which is a mistranslation. Even the interpreters admit that. She talks about that in our interview today.
But she goes further back than that,
Yeah,
which
she
I
does.
found really interesting.
Much further back. So Missy and I will be right back with Kathy Baldock to talk about her new book, Forging a Sacred Weapon, the 1946 Bible Misinterpretation Behind Anti-Gay Theology. As a former college baseball player, I know firsthand the challenges athletes face. That's why we're proud to support Christian Athlete Circles, a ministry that is creating spaces and resources to accompany athletes on their faith journey, wherever they are. To learn more about Christian Athlete Circles, go to ChristianAthleteCircles.org. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us, Kathy Baldock, author, LGBTQ advocate, international speaker, and educator, and executive director of CanyonWalker Connections, is a leading expert on LGBTQ issues in the United States, especially regarding historical and current discrimination faced by the socially conservative Christian church and political sector. Her 2014 book, Walking the Bridgeless Canyon, Repairing the Breach Between the Church and the LGBT Community, and accompanying Untangling the Mess presentations, blog, podcasts, and videos, piece together the history behind LGBTQ persecution in the church and the need for conservative Christians and church leaders to become better educated in order to properly engage members of the LGBTQ community. Her newest book, Forging a Sacred Weapon, the 1946 Bible Misinterpretation Behind the Anti-Gay Theology, is currently available where you purchase your reading material. Kathy, happy Pride and welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Hello. That's a long introduction. You could just say, Kathy lives in Nevada. She hikes and reads a lot. That would be good.
And we're kind of bitter about it.
That I live in such a beautiful place.
Yes.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
so beautiful.
Really pretty. But you can understand then when you've been here, why that adds to how I process, how I think. Because when I get stuck, when I'm trying to get clarity, I go out for a hike anyway, but I hike twice a day. And so many of my best ideas and the things that gel in my head and the pieces that connect, which I think is the gift that I have when I connect pieces, all happen out in nature and on the trail. So although I grew up in Manhattan, this is where I belong because it works in my head. It just works for me.
Well, we were out there near you just a few weeks ago in Lake Tahoe, and we can contest that you're exactly right. It is a beautiful place and a great place to think.
And we are so
Yes.
grateful that you do all of the thinking that you
Absolutely.
do. So let's just start off by talking about the origins of the book. And for those who may not be familiar with you, you started researching the mistranslation of the 1946 NRSV Bible years ago. So tell our audience what first brought you to this work and what has motivated you to dedicate so much of your life to it.
Well, it's going to be two separate answers because the newest book is something different.
Mm-hmm.
But what brought me to the work originally was hiking, hiking along a trail as I was going through a divorce, and I needed a place for praying, crying, just being able to feel because I wasn't. I was trying to keep a lid on it because I call him my husband. My husband and I had it's so much kinder than ex. It's just a gentler word. He forbade me from speaking about the impending divorce because we owned a small business and it was very successful. And that tension would have risen within the staff and probably the customer base. And he didn't want that. We were facing a very financially secure Christmas season, so I had to keep all my pain inside,
Mm-hmm.
which is I wouldn't do it the same again. But I couldn't tell people, I couldn't talk to people about it. So my antidote for it was to hike. And when I started hiking, there was a woman that was hiking on the trails every weekend, and she seemed to hike the same pace I did. And so I just decided one day I had a horrible morning at home. It was a Saturday morning. He had been yelling at me. It was his own guilt coming out. He had had an affair, and I didn't know that at the time. And so all of his anger was coming out at me and blaming. And, you just know how that goes. And it was horrible. And I just didn't want to go home. So when I saw Netto yet again, I just thought, I think I need another hour and a half on the trails. So I asked her if I could join her, and the friendship was fast. And the other thing that was important about it was that I was able to just tell her, because she was a stranger,
Mm-hmm.
eventually tell her what I was going through in my life. And so I couldn't talk to people about it. No, I was forbidden to talk to people about it. So Netto became a refuge. And when I did start talking to my Christian friends about it, my closest friends, they somehow leaked it out. And I became the prayer request of many women's groups.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know how that goes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was no longer a secret. And so Netto just became an easy resting spot for me, a good hiking companion. And in that, I just came to see her as a person, and she is still a lesbian, a Native American, pretty dark skinned, Hispanic last name, and an agnostic.
Yeah.
And that is who God chose to put in my path to make me a kinder, more aware, less ignorant person. It was her. And then a person in my Italian class, because I also decided to take an Italian class to tie up my mind a little bit. And the person I was paired with in my Italian class was the only gay man in class, Tom Durante, who's also still a friend. We have a dinner date in a few weeks. Netto's my best friend, Tom's in my life, and those Christian girlfriends, they're not around anymore.
Yep. Yep.
So we all know how that goes,
Sure.
You make decisions that go against the tribe, and the tribe doesn't want you to be in there. They vote you off the island, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
So she was clearly really impactful in opening your
Oh,
eyes to new
absolutely.
perspectives. Is that what motivates you to dedicate your life to this work?
So she started bringing me to all the lesbian parties, and Netto is older than me. So I was around the women that had been, so it wasn't the younger generation of lesbians, which really are different than the older
Sure.
ones. So we're talking about today, there would be the over 65s. And but they were at the time over 50 and very coupled up, and many of them had come out in the 70s and 80s. And so there was just different attitudes going on. And the same with Tom. Tom's friends were the older gay men. And so what I saw was they were not who I was told they would be. I was told in evangelical churches at the time, the lines were, their love isn't love, it's lust. It's not God's pure love. They didn't commit in long-term relationships. They had rebelled against God, all of these things that I believe. And there had been no place to check out these assumptions because I didn't have gay friends in the Christian church that I knew of. And so Netto was really good about bringing me in. We managed a really comfortable relationship that even her side didn't understand. So they were like, why are you hanging around with this Christian all the time? They would call me, Netto's dog walking friend or Netto's Christian friend.
Yeah.
And I would say to them all the time, like, I have a name, like I
Mhm.
go by Kathy, that would be appropriate. But her friends were confused and my friends were confused. But we enjoyed each other's company and we just kept going. And it took her a year to come out to me. So it was that disconnect that made me curious, but I still didn't study scripture for about another 5 years. So that started me onto this path.
Yeah.
But the latest path of looking at the 1946 mistranslation, that all happened because I'd been teaching. I have a unique way of teaching. I teach along timelines, and it's very effective. And so people can look at the course of history because the problem is we take our 21st century mind and apply it, our assumptions, our knowledge and assumptions to first century text, to Hebrew text. That doesn't work.
Right.
And so I do a pretty good job of explaining how things have transpired through history, all the different influences from politics, military, sociology, culture, all those, and religious interpretations, so that by the time you get to the 20th century when the interpretations were happening, you can really understand why they made the decisions they did. But I had been teaching for years along this timeline, and I would get to a point and I would say, and the first time the word homosexuals was in the Bible was in the RSV 1946 New Testament, and the full Bible comes out in 52. But I would say, because these people, the men on the team, were born between 1870 and 1917, and we've just looked at what was known or understood or assumed about homosexuality at the time or same-sex relations, this is what they brought to the table. So using their assumptions of what they brought to the table, I declared with confidence that their interpretation was based on ideology and cultural influences and not theology, because there was no theology
Right.
Right.
on sexual ethics. There was really
Yeah.
no declared evangelical sexual ethics. Even people weren't talking about sex. If they were talking about sex from like the 50s on, they were doing it minimally, but they were talking about teenage sex, like the
Right.
terrible teenagers.
Sure.
And so they weren't even talking about marital sex. And so, so I knew that this couldn't be theology behind it. So I would declare this and with confidence, but you can declare all you want with confidence until you have evidence.
Yeah.
And then that's where Ed Oxford comes into the picture.
Yeah.
He had heard me speak twice. And in his second seminar, he got very curious about it. And he started, after hearing me speak a few times, he went and started collecting old Bibles and documents to see what the word had been before homosexuals. So he started amassing a really impressive collection of dictionaries, commentaries, Bibles, really impressive. And he invited me to his house when I was in Southern California once, and I went and I was very impressed. And then he's the one that took it the next step. He
Yeah.
thought, I wonder where the head of this translation team was Luther Weigel. I knew stories about him, but Ed wondered if maybe Luther Weigel, his first question was not the translation notes, but I wonder if Luther Weigel ever declared after they made this decision that he was wrong. So that started his pursuit. And then he found out Luther Weigel's archives were in the Yale Sterling Memorial Library. So that's how the whole thing
Yeah.
happened. going back to Yale.
And this story is chronicled in the documentary 1946. It is a
Mm-hmm.
fascinating story, and there's
Mm-hmm.
actually more to it. And I mean, it just really is remarkable. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, Kathy, I've worked through parts of the book. Let me just say this. It is so well researched. Forging a Sacred Weapon. You've done such a great job of laying out this argument, especially points that you just mentioned a moment ago about how sexuality has been discussed throughout history and how it's not been discussed throughout history and the evolution of that conversation. And you just do a brilliant job throughout the entirety of the book. So the book goes to great lengths to demonstrate this evolution, these attitudes towards gender roles and sexual ethics throughout history. And the research is thorough, as I said. So let me ask you this. What do you think are some of the most important moments in history when cultures began gravitating towards what we define now as patriarchy, restrictive gender roles, and this anti-sexual ethic that we see even today?
Well, patriarchy comes from probably 10,000 years ago. So it's been pretty well embedded as we moved from, so these are all separate answers. As we moved from nomadic peoples, as the climate stabilized and we moved from nomadic people to people in settlements, and as people in settlements, before that, communities, tribes, they were only bands of people. They were probably no more than 100 to 125 people roaming around together because that's all they could
Sure. Yeah.
sustain.
Makes sense.
But as the settlements, as people established themselves as settlements, populations grew,
Mhm.
civilizations grew. But as populations started to grow and um, job definitions became more refined, male and female job definitions, which had been egalitarian, shifted.
Yeah.
So there's actually in history, there are very few matriarchies, and they're really not even true matriarchies. They're not matriarchies from, governance to power to dictation in the home. There's a few that have, people will say there's matriarchies, but they're not. There's no true matriarchies. We have always, all of us have always been a patriarchy. So that is problematic right from the start
Mhm.
because so males have seen from their point of view this inferiority through history of women. And so that spills over to anyone that takes the sexual role of a woman or anyone that takes the social sexual role of a woman. So the basis of this entire problem argument perspective is that there are males that take this penetrative role of females, and that is worse than being a female because they have chosen to place themselves lower than a female. So all through history, that's been a problematic thing, and we see it to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, the still stigmatization against bottoms versus tops, right?
Right.
Because that's the role of the female. So it's consistent. But things start so all through history, it has been either the role of a woman or the role of a male that takes a woman. And it does not matter if the person that's being penetrated is placed into the role of a woman without consent. So there's no such thing as consent in the ancient world for enslaved people, prostituted people, foreigners that are conquered, all those kinds of males that would have been penetrated. They have no ability to consent or not consent. But still, even though they're the victim, they are still stigmatized and penalized because somehow they have submitted themselves or put themselves in that role that blurred the genders, which is really unfortunate. And so when Paul says that both the arsenokoitai and the malakoi are both condemned, that's part of that
Right.
reasoning is that person put themselves in that role and or they had been feminized. They really believed through hundreds of years after that that the act of penetration and the act of putting semen into a male actually physically changed him and feminized him. changed the position of where in his body the semen was stored, why he wanted to be penetrated more. So it was like it was a never-ending circle.
Sure.
Once penetrated, I mean, you were put in that position, and people say, well, it's not fair. Well, where is the fairness that half the population, the female population, is also seen as inferior just because?
Mm-hmm.
So things don't start changing. Very consistent views, very consistent for hundreds of years, a millennia. It only starts to change in about the 15th century when they bring back dissection. And when they bring back dissection, they start to realize that there are differences in bodies. They're starting to look at that women might be different, and then they have other reasons to subjugate women. Then women become just culturally inferior.
Right.
But when science starts coming in, it just starts very slowly shifting the conversation. And as I point out in the book, there's some transition points that seem incredibly odd of why these transition points would be leading up to the conversation about sexuality, because the conversation about sexuality does not come from nowhere, but it comes from strange places.
Yeah. Yeah.
It comes from the discussion of, and I pointed out in the book, and it probably seemed very absurd when I started talking about Carl Linnaeus's process of taxonomy, when
Right.
he began to categorize plants.
Yeah.
And the way he categorized plants, he gave them male and female parts. And that's what opened the door to people having conversations about human sexuality, as odd as that sounds. But it's still going to take time.
Sure.
But when people start having the conversation about sexuality, and when they do, in Germany, things start to change.
Absolutely.
And that is the key place where it changes.
So, Kathy, okay, so looking at this through history, I feel like is fascinating. And Mitch and I were having a conversation before we came on to interview you today about how religion, in a sense, is humankind's way of trying to explain the unexplainable. Like you mentioned just a moment ago, science plays in, and now we know more scientifically. But let's hone in, because I feel like our culture seeks to explain sexual ethic and intimacy through the reading of scripture. So let's talk about scripture for a moment. How much of scripture in sexuality and intimacy has more to do with power and power imbalances than true intimacy? Because I feel like we're trying, like you mentioned a moment ago, we're trying to take our 21st century eyes and place it, in ancient history, and that doesn't work. And how many preachers and pastors will, extricate a text. Is that the right word? Okay, a text from the Bible.
Sounds good to me.
to try to prove, it's one man and one woman, and we're holy matrimony, and it's this, romantic, spiritualized thing, when maybe that wasn't actually what was going on. So how much of the Bible do you feel is about the intimacy that we understand today versus power imbalances?
The sexual act through history, whether it's in the Bible, whether it be in the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament, the sexual acts we see are about dominance and power.
Yeah.
I don't think there's no evidence of a consistent sexual ethic in the Bible. There's none. It changes.
That is so refreshing to hear, because so many times you hear that there is this consistent sexual ethic, but there is none. And as you point out in the book.
There is none.
Yeah.
There is no sexual ethic. And if you look even at history, so if you go outside the Bible and you trace what's happening in the Bible, and I do it in the book, and I think the Middle Ages are fascinating. In the first book, I probably gave the Middle Ages maybe a page and a half. Well, now I give the Middle Ages 2 chapters, because it's, well, probably even more with other overlaps. But it's a fascinating period of time. But what we see happening is, in the first century, those verses talk about, they allude to, they point to abuse, exploitation. But even that is a difficult sentence to say, because it's from our perspective today, because it would not have been seen as exploitation and abuse at the time, because it was part of society. It is just what was. It was tolerated. Paul never spoke against slavery. He just basically said, treat them fairly, treat your enslaved people fairly. But he's not, when we talk about, like, people will say, well, this is pederasty. Those are also modern words on ancient texts. Because again, the Greeks wouldn't have seen that as pederasty. That's our view. They saw it as a mentoring program. Very difficult for us to put our logic on these ancient sexual ethics, but you have to read them in context. And then as soon as, so when Paul writes that, the contemporary interpreters around him start interpreting his text as abuse of children, corruption of children. So he doesn't say that, but all his commentators at the time starts interpreting arsenokoitai as they come up with a new word that means the corruption of children. They replace arsenokoitai with this other word, paedothoresis. And so, but the problem is now it becomes a Christian world. And as it's growing into more of a Christian world, this sexual use and abuse of children starts dropping away. And the Catholic Church, their focus on sexual ethics becomes all about procreation, which is not what the original text was about. But that is going to be the thing that now persists for over 1,000 years through the Middle Ages. You know, the best sex was no sex. And if you had fun doing it, that was inappropriate. There was no passion in sex. Sex had to be procreative. That's not what the original text meant. But
Right.
already they're misinterpreting it. And that held through all of history. So that interpretation, so naturally what's going to happen as time progresses, and you don't want people to have non-procreative sex, same-sex sex by its nature is not procreative.
Yeah.
So it starts to focus in the end of the 1800s, and it doesn't focus on women, it focuses on men, because it's, who cares what women do with their bodies, really? Because they are at the lowest of the low anyway. And until the end of the 1800s, there was no science that even said that a woman contributed anything to this procreation process other than being a fertile planting ground. They didn't even understand that she had an egg. So it
Right.
was all about the men. So it was men's abuse of semen, men subjugating themselves, subjugating other people, men putting themselves in the position of a woman. So it was, the focus was all on men. And when the shift starts happening, and all these pieces have to be in place for the next question to be asked, for the next question to be asked. And I'm hoping that I'm so clear in that in the book that you see this step has to happen, this step has to happen. All these things have to come together for one person to say, why do people do sex differently? And so when all those pieces come into place in the middle of the 1800s, I'm hoping a reader says, okay, so this is the time all of this stuff had to happen for one person to say, why are people attracted to the same sex? How is it even possible that Paul, 1800 years before that, could have asked that question? He never could have asked that question.
Yeah.
That wasn't his concern. So I'm hoping that if I go through history slowly enough, that people will track with, oh, all these things had to happen. All of this difference, all of this reinterpretation of scripture happens. And also, I would want people to understand that most of the time it's got almost nothing to do with God. It's got nothing to do with God.
Yeah.
It is people interpreting texts to control others, to control sex, to control men and women. It's all about control, about non-procreation, about sodomy laws. It's got nothing to do with God. I once was speaking at doing a teaching, and someone raised their hand and they were so disappointed in me. They were in a church. They thought I was going to talk about what the Bible said about these things and they said, you haven't talked about the Bible in the last 3 hours. And I said, yeah, because it's not, this is not what the Bible did. This is
Right.
what people have done.
Sure.
So all of these things should be really clear by the time we get to 1930 and do the interpretation.
So I think part of what I hear you saying, what I'm thinking about in real time, is that I feel like societally today we're asking better questions, which is when it comes to sex, we're looking at power imbalances, we're looking at consent, and those are, two biggies. And that societally, that's great. The problem is that societally, also these biblical misinterpretations have such a grip
Yes,
on us
yes.
that even those of us who have been able to put that aside and look at these current questions still have that so ingrained that it's part of the foundation of who we are as a people, and it's still being used to control
Mhm.
in those spaces.
So I think one of my greatest successes in life, in my professional life, at the end will have been that I popularized that the word homosexual was first in the Bible in 1946,
Mhm.
because the overwhelming majority of Christians would never have known that.
Right.
So we enter this conversation absolutely believing this word has always been in the Bible.
Right.
Most people, so the switch starts happening in the middle of the 1970s, and it starts happening because, and if you've gotten, and I also love the chapters on, I love those chapters 22 on, where you know the the line of certainty happens and the line of questioning and listening is going a different way. People call it conservative progressive, but I call it listening and certainty. And so everything starts to divide right there.
Mhm.
And it starts dividing because one person says, the Bible, using the words of the Bible, has changed me from being a homosexual to heterosexual.
Mhm.
So before that, there's this, we see the start of biblical counseling, but he doesn't have the right to say that until the mistranslation happens, until the word homosexual is in the Bible, until it's absolutely there, and then four other Bible translations pick it up, and then it becomes cemented. People believe that that has always been. They don't understand that that is a very modern occurrence.
Right.
First of all, in 52, that it was in one place, but the horrible thing is that in 1971, the Living Bible not only, and they all, the New American Standard, the Living Bible, the NIV, all used the RSV as the base text.
Mhm.
And so somebody wrote me a letter the other day and said, but I'm reading the beginning of whichever Bible they said, and they're not using it as the base text. And I said, yeah, but I've been in the archives. I know I don't
Right.
care what they say they're doing. We've been in those archives and we know what they did. We know they used the base text. We see the charts. And so the worst of them, the NIV starts in 56, but the worst of them is the Living Bible. It's a paraphrase.
Sure.
Kenneth Taylor not only puts homosexuals in First Corinthians, he reinforces that, but he puts it in 5 more places.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes the most popular Bible of the day because it's the one the Billy Graham crusades hand out.
Yeah.
So
My
people that
parents
have no
had one.
memory before this, so it's for most people, it's always been in there
Mm-hmm.
in their lifetime because it heats up in the 70s. It's always been there. People, they just don't know history.
Right.
They
Mhm.
don't know history.
Yeah.
So in their perspective, all the history they know, it's always been. It's just always been that way. And so that's my point, is to pick that apart.
Well, Kathy, there is so much in the book. Like I said, we could talk about this for hours. And
And
we
we will at a conference.
Well, that's right.
We will.
Absolutely, we will. But to our readers, we want to encourage you, go get the book, Forging a Sacred Weapon, the 1946 Bible Misinterpretation Behind Anti-Gay Theology. It is outstanding. Kathy, before I let you go and turn you over to Missy, I do have one last question for me. And that is, you have dedicated your life, your career towards this work, and you lay out this incredible argument in the book. At the end of the day, how do you see this argument playing out in the public? Because we're all hoping, those of us, who are supportive of our LGBTQ community, affirming of who they are as a person, as a community, wanting them to be more included and receiving more equality in culture at large. Do you think an argument like this is going to transform people's mind if they just know the truth? Do you think that they are more apt to have a more affirming position? Or are stories like the one you just told, how you found this woman on a trail and got to know her and then discovered, oh my gosh, she's a lesbian, but knew her as a human being? is it both? Is it both these human connections that we make and this biblical argument, historical argument that you're making that you hope will eventually transform the world to be more inclusive?
It's both.
Yeah.
It's both, but people will stop at relationship. Oh, I have a gay hairdresser. Oh, my barista is a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
My dog walker is a lesbian. But we've got to get straight people to be allies.
Yeah.
And I think the education piece it's really strong. I think it's very strong. And I recognize, and I wrap it all together at the end of the book, because it's like, how is change ever going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think change is going to happen from the big seminaries, the big publishing houses, the mega churches, the denominations. Although the Methodists changed, Reformed Church in America changed, I absolutely believe that by educating people, and my big heart is for, and I think they are a very effective group of people, are the moms.
Mhm.
And you've got a free mom hug shirt on there. And so, yeah, it's the moms, because they're in every denomination, every pew. They knew this kid before this kid came out. They know this kid now. And those moms are going to speak up and ask those questions in their Bible studies, in their friend groups. And I believe that they're the ones, or people asking the questions, are going to change things. I believe, and I also built the case starting from the beginning of the book, with the flood story, with the creation story, with the Sodom story, that God is a God that restores peace and gets chaos and evil under control with a remnant of people. They
Yeah.
are never the most powerful. They are never the most plentiful and numerous and dominant. It is always the remnant that is the example of the Bible. And I believe it is the example here. So sociology tells us that once you tip something 19%, 19% of the people strongly for something, it is like game over.
Yep.
It starts to move in that direction. And I believe we're getting there, but it's the people in the pews that are going to start asking the questions, and they're going to challenge the authorities over them. But I have great hope in small churches,
Yeah.
pastors
Absolutely.
and small churches that really have been called to be pastors. I'm already in communication with some. Some have ordered my book directly from
Excellent.
me,
Excellent.
and I've told them that if you commit to reading the book and you commit to doing the 8-week study associated with it, I will help you. But you have to have the buy-in on your part, because I can't see how somebody could go through this book and then the 8-week discussion guide and not come out affirming. But if they're not, at least they're informed.
Absolutely.
Well, at least all their silly assumptions are aside. So I have great hope in allies, um, pastors of smaller churches, LGBTQ people themselves, and just the simple people just speaking up. But it takes, to change these conversations and to have different kinds of conversations that are productive, you have to approach it differently than just arguing about the text.
Yeah.
I think the historical context is an incredible way to have productive, gracious conversations.
Forging a Sacred Weapon by Kathy Baldock. Thank you so much for the book, for our conversation today. But Kathy, before we let you go, we've got one last question that we're going to ask you, and Missy has the honor of asking it.
So, Kathy, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
Why do I first feel like crying? I feel like I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that things will change, because I really feel like finding these letters written by David really, really matter.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to get evidence. I was able to find evidence that the original people that did this work realized when challenged they made a mistake. And I'm really hoping that with the documentary 1946 and this and people talking about it, people will go back and say, we made a mistake. The mistake was made with bad assumptions, not in malice, but bad assumptions. And can we, as we do with many things, can we go back and re-examine this with correct assumptions and knowing what we know now? And I really am hopeful that a change can come. But we also know that work on Bible translations takes a long time.
Yeah.
The NIV started in 1956, published in 71 and 78. These things take a long time, but people in the pews, I'm allies, learn and speak up and challenge the prevailing assumptions associated with this. And I really am hopeful that this can change. And, the prayer is, may it start with me. And so I'm hopeful. I think it can happen, not overnight. And politics really pushing against this, but people need to learn and speak up. Yeah,
May
I'm
it be
hopeful.
so, Kathy Baldock. We agree with you 100%. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and you are welcome back anytime, my friend.
Thank you.
And to our audience, we want to thank you for joining us this week. Missy and I are going to take next week off, and then we'll be back in 2 weeks with another guest. Until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.